Welcome to our dear friends, Dr. John Maeda's lectures. Dr. John Maeda's lectures. A strange reunion. I saw so many nice familiar faces. We worked together in the late 19th, also 20th. I came to MIT in 1995. Then John Maeda landed next year, 1996. We are so happy together in E15 fourth floor corners. He studied aesthetics and computation group, also tangible media group, and also day and night. Till midnight, we worked together and having so many amazing stuff. But also I learned so many things from John Maeda. One first one is what aesthetics means. That's so important beyond the utility or pragmatic stuff. So I learned so much, but also we work together how to really manage. Management is something and not so much reward. You have to really work so hard, but no, basically thankless job. But we did a lot of fundraising together after the first financial crisis. Yeah. But anyway, he's so famous. He got every design award. He's a real guru. He's a real influencer. He's a real visionary and opinion leader. I learned so much. But I'm so lucky because I was invited to Seattle 2 weeks ago. Then he showed up to my talk. Then he also came to stage. That really reunited us about the passion of research, art, also education. So now I'd like to let Dr. John Maeda to.
Thank you. All right. Apologies to remote people. I bought all this equipment and it isn't working really well. Let me just say, for you all online, I'll try to speak as loudly as possible. I have 3 microphones. This is probably the best one I have. And again, I apologize in advance to you. All of you here do not need a microphone because you're IRL. So we're okay? Can you hear me? Yes. You can hear me? Okay, look, that works well. Okay, real life works so well, Hiroshi. Okay, let me operate this. And by the way, for those who are remote, I'm also operating a Zoom webinar, so I won't be able to see things at the same time. All right, this is the power of remote. Okay, so you should see that. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay, good. Okay, let me see. This is a screen over here. I doubled that over there. Let me make this larger. In this room today, I can see in the back of my head, there is Ramona Allen, and I'm just so delighted to get to see her after all these years. Taught me the importance of the human resources profession. It is an important profession because people are the core of everything. And so glad you're here, Ramona. Thank you. I am here today to be with my dear friend Hiroshi, and I have a OBSBot camera that kind of tracks me sometimes. And I'm feeling a bit awkward because I'm doing remote and this here. And Hiroshi's here too, but I'll do my best. Are we good? Yes. Okay, let's go. All right. First off, if you're wondering if you're at the right talk or not, this is called basically how I learned to speak human after leaving MIT. I spent a lot of my early life at MIT, and I had to figure out what it's like being not at MIT, because it's a really cool place, but it can also be its own kind of echo chamber of sorts. And learning how to speak human has been a kind of a passion of mine. And what does that mean? It means thinking about things beyond technology, which makes life much more interesting, right? And for those of you out there who are curious about the world today, stuff happened in the United States, and this is a PSA. Let's try to be thoughtful of people who differ from, quote unquote, us. I happen to be of the Japanese American heritage, and so I'm just more aware of the history of the United States and things like the Japanese internment. And can you imagine being like an American person and rounded up to be like taken somewhere? That's like decades ago. Still happens today. So all of us, let's remember, if we're different from ourselves, can't we still take care of them too? And this is the Media Lab, and I admit to everyone who knows me well knows I'll always say, I didn't go to liberal arts school, so I'm dumb. Meaning I don't really know a lot of things, this is where I came from. And so later people told me about Marshall McLuhan, and I was like, who is this person? And in later years of life, I began to read more of him. And I left what he says, once we have surrendered our senses and nervous systems to the private manipulation of those who would try to benefit by taking a lease on our eyes and ears and nerves, we don't really have any rights left. That's from the 70s. That's not the internet era. That's a long sort of misperceived aspect of what does media mean? It means influence. It's either positive influence, like education can be, or negative influence, like propaganda. And what's important in this today in this room is Jane is here, William J. Mitchell's Agatha. But some of you don't know William J. Mitchell, but he was the total badass dean of architecture. This current dean is pretty good at doing it too, but badass dean. And he wrote a book called The Reconfigured Eye. And it's an unknown book. I say when you die, your SEO goes to shit. But his book, Reconfigured Eye, is a very important book because it talks about how images have been used for propaganda forever, since the printing press, basically. So it's important to note that how we use media for good or for not good is important to consider, especially right now. Okay, so we're at the Media Lab, and some of you know the three circles, the three bend. I know some people here who were there in the beginning of the publishing, broadcasting, computing thing. And I can't think of a more important place today because of this word, media. Again, the power, the influence that resulted because computing forced this convergence. All these ideas of personalization were great, but they also came with hidden consequences. All right, so some of you know about this thing, IDEO, David Kelly, the T-shaped person. Who's heard of T-shaped person? T-shaped person. Zoom people can raise their hand, and then you'll beat everybody in this room. T-shaped person, it means that you have breadth and you have depth is the idea, because most of the times you're a monodisciplinary person. Rarely do you have people who go across disciplines. Over time, I've learned there's also pie-shaped. There's also mu-shaped people, and who knows, maybe they're caterpillar people, I don't know anymore. But what I find interesting is that it all goes to a very simple idea, I believe. When I was president of Rhode Island School of Design, I used to walk around campus a lot. And people would come up to me, we'd talk, like managing by walking around. And this one student came up to me and said, "Hey, John, I just noticed you're talking to those people over there. You shouldn't talk to them." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "They're talkers." I said, "Oh, they're talkers. Yeah, they talk about stuff. They don't do anything." And I said, "Who should I talk with instead?" "You should talk to the makers." I said, "Who are the makers?" We make. We don't waste time talking." And I said to him, "You're talking to me. So aren't you a talker?" But anyways, I learned that there's a riskiness near maker, but has a little talker. And you need to have talker because it's powerful. Maybe engineers know that too. I've taken this and extended it actually further. There's a talker and maker, live somewhere between the thinker and doer. The thinker is, idea. Doer is like executor, right? The talker sits between there. I think this person's from Harvard. They're like, oh, whoa, go, right? That's a good place to be. And then MITers, I think, live over here. Thinker maker. It's a really good spot. And people ask me, who's a doer maker? And I say, you're from Stanford. Usually make a lot more money too. So anyways, this is a way I've seen the world over time, and not making fun of anything. It's just a notion that it's good to see across. So you came here because I think you came on this airplane because you're curious about hybrid people, careers. The beauty of a hybrid person is you can see across. I'm American of Japanese heritage. There are people of different identities. So when you have that, you can see multiple things at the same time. But the problem is, and this has been written about for a long time, is we humans love to be different, but if we can just take a break by fitting in, we'll take that. So it's the common problem. You want to go across, but eventually you want to go back. It takes a lot of energy. And I've noticed with different heroes of mine, they all were hybrid when they were younger, but when they're older, they're like, I'm just tired. I prefer to be a physicist, or I prefer to be whatever. You want to go home. And so hybridity fades with age sometimes, so what I notice. But there's one guy not fading at all, and that's Hiroshi Ishii. You don't fade at all. It's amazing. You look the same. So Hiroshi Ishii came to Seattle, and one of my friends said, "Hey, this guy Hiroshi Ishii is coming." Oh, I know that guy. I went to his lecture, and I was blown away. Give him an applause for Hiroshi Ishii. Those who know him. I was just so inspired, and I was so inspired that I wanted to come here and do something back. So thank you, Hiroshi.
My pleasure.
We've been around for a while, and I've been like tracking him online, and I was very happy when Hiroshi received the CHI Lifetime Achievement Award. Those of you who don't know what CHI is, it's the Elite Interface Computer Conference, and that's where me and my dear friend Brian Smith used to always say, what does CHI stand for? Conference for Hiroshi Ishii. Is that right? It's so weird. Okay, there we go. So anyways, just some back, but the reason why it was so meaningful to me when Hiroshi came is because where he spoke was a few blocks from where I grew up. I grew up in Chinatown, now called International District. It's not a nice part of Seattle, but just a few blocks away is where I grew up. And I remembered, now it's a wonton house, but I grew up in this spot over here, 608 Weller Street. And it wasn't a very nice place. It's always very smelly, because there's trash cans everywhere. So I was very used to smelling trash. And where I played is here. This is the back area. And this was my world. And I'm tearing up thinking about this. This is odd. I'm so emotional to see you, Hiroshi. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. And this is my father. And my teachers used to say that I was good at art and math. But my father would always tell our customers I was good at math. I always thought it was strange how I never talked about the art thing. And so that hybridity to me was denied from the beginning. And we had a family business. It means you got to work all the time. Whoever grew up in a family business, you know what this is about? You got to work. And vacation doesn't mean school vacation doesn't mean vacation. It means you got to work. I used to love going to school because it was warm and no one yelling at you. It was awesome. And he had this typical dream many immigrants have, which is to go to MIT or Harvard. It's this weird delusional thing. And we had no idea where these places were. We were in Seattle. It wasn't until I was like in high school that I know the M stood for Massachusetts. And then I realized I was far away. And I was very lucky because in high school, there was a teacher, Thomas Wakefield, chemistry teacher, retired Boeing engineer, who took interest in me. And he told me I'm not going to get to MIT because I didn't have all the things I would need to go to such a school. So he came to the tofu store on a weekend and told my parents I had to vacation meant I had to go do summer classes. So big deal. So teachers do make a difference. Those of you out there who know this, there's one or a few people out there who made that difference. If they're alive right now, send them a message because I wasn't able to send Mr. Wakefield a message. So please do that today. Okay, so it was 1984, I was graduating from high school, and there was this thing called the Macintosh came out. And my mother saved up money to get me one. And I came to MIT with this weird computer, and I remembered it was so different from the computing paradigm that was more common here. Regular terminals, PCs, why are pictures on your screen? That's gross. That was the era, really. But because of it, I had landed in the era where the AI lab was just tapering off. And who remembers the Symbolics Lisp machine? Come on. Oh, Lamborghini of computing. There we go. Lamborghini of computing. Please look that one up, the Symbolics Lisp machine. There was also something called the connection machine, those who remember, which is now a bar in the lower lobby. It's tragic. But there was a time where computing was exotic, and that era was quite exciting for anyone in the field. And this building is named after Jerome Wiesner, who was quite an unusual person because he had this belief that having worked on the Manhattan Project, many scientists of that era realized that science is amazing, but sometimes it can do things that you wonder about later in life. Many scientists with a conscience are part of the people that I remember from my generation of professors. And Wiesner was super famous. But I didn't know it because I was like in building 10 in the elevator. There was an older guy walking in, starts talking to me about where do you live? And I'm like, this is very creepy. And then the next day I noticed he was important. He was in all these newspapers, and he was an ex-president of MIT, advisor to JFK, the real deal. And because of a sound isolation problem for people of here and here, I can't play the video, but I have this video here of Wiesner. And I'll turn this off without any whatever. But it's a scene where he's explaining where President Kennedy is asking about the effects of nuclear weapons and what's going to happen. And Wiesner describes how Look outside the window now, President, and people picketing outside there. It's raining. They have umbrellas. The radiation will come from the rain into all the drains, and it will infect everything. And he said Kennedy would hear these things, sit in his rocking chair, and just wonder during that era, an era of extreme danger. That's where Wiesner came from. Wiesner was total badass, combo science advocate, but also he believed the arts were an important counterbalance to sciences. And then we may know Nicholas Negroponte, the other co-founder of the Media Lab. There was someone named Muriel Cooper. Who remembers Muriel Cooper? Muriel Cooper was probably the social conscious of Negroponte, I believe. He was a design guru. She was the soul of the Media Lab's design entity. And I really remember that was an important thing. And she's the one who, when I met her, when I was as an undergraduate, told me to leave MIT and go to art school. And that was pretty good advice. But I wanted to stay. So I was joined the PhD program here. And I had an unfortunate situation with an advisor. Some of you will remember that. And suddenly, I had to drop out of MIT. And that was the best thing ever. So I dropped out of that program, and then I like to say that failure is a good thing. It just doesn't feel that way when it happens to you. It was awesome failure. Didn't feel good then, but it really helped reshape who I am. Failure is awesome, right? It's good. It's a good thing. So anyway, I rematerialized in the art world. I went to a Bauhaus-inspired school in Japan. Hey, Ton, how you doing? A Bauhaus-inspired school in Japan, and restarted things. I was away from the computer, which was really important. Because in the 80s, people didn't know, but we were like stuck to computers then. Luckily, they weren't mobile, but we were stuck to them. And so I was computerless, and I had to learn things like, I remember I was in an ink drawing class, and I immediately did this, which is undo. I realized there's no undo in the physical world. So things like that struck me, and I basically relearned how to be. And at the same time, I rediscovered computers. I bought something called a Next computer, which ran display PostScript, and began writing computer programs that could visualize what I was drawing. And I found that really exciting. And with that, I began drawing all kinds of things that I thought were difficult for a human being to draw. And this was the early 90s, and it resulted in doing all kinds of things for different people. I was lucky to be somewhat active in that space in the 90s. This is my favorite piece. It's called the About Clock. It's a California West Coast style clock. It's never accurate. And so these are things I used to build. And then I heard that Muriel Cooper passed away, and the Media Lab needed someone to continue along her vein. And so I came to the States. I was living in Japan back then. And I took the opportunity to visit someone I had always wanted to meet, a person named Paul Rand. Paul Rand is a graphic designer who designed the IBM logo, the Next logo, a lot of UPS, things like that. He was iconic, and really he was the person that when I found his book when I was a sophomore in the humanities library, I thought, whoa, what is this design thing? I never heard of it. I want to do it. I came to visit him in Connecticut, and I dropped by the Media Lab, and some of you who were there were kind enough to bring me here as a professor, so I thank you for that opportunity that I had. It was fun. And I had this moment where when I met him, the first thing I did when I joined the Media Lab is I invited him to speak here. Some of you may remember that. And then a month later, he died. That's dark, I know, but it's, wow, wait a second. It was amazing. He came, Nicholas was excited, Bill was excited, he was offered a professorship. I thought, I'm starting off my career here, I'm going to have Paul Rand nearby, and then he died. And I thought, whoa, interesting. That's why when Hiroshi came to Seattle, Hiroshi is the greatest graphic designer in the world. Let me explain. This is my version of a slide you draw, and every time I see it, I'm like, oh, that's genius. Hiroshi gives this amazing talk for 50 minutes of all the passion you should have and leaving a legacy, right? He always goes there, but then he goes in for the jugular at the end. Because everyone's drawn in. Hiroshi, yes, I want to be like that. He's a sage, he's a Yoda kind of thing. And then he says, this is now, and this is the future. This is my now, and this is the future. Some of you know this slide. I've redrawn it myself. Sorry, so that's the exact same thing. Then he says, but in 2060, I will be gone, he says. And if there's young people in the audience, you're like, yeah, he looks old. Yeah. Yeah, he'll be gone. Yeah, not me, not me. Then he says, and then you will all be gone. And everyone goes, whoa, this is the greatest design ever. But me and Hiroshi get along because I've thought about this myself. Even with the Paul Rand moment, or for those of you who had friends or loved ones, or even more recently through COVID, we don't last forever. And it's important to keep that in mind because it gives us perspective. And while I was here, I made something in PHP. It's called the Life Countdown page. It's still running, but you can type in your age. It looks at where you are, and it gives you the number of springs you'll have left as icons. So gray means those springs are gone. Color means you'll have them. And I was in Media Lab when I was 30, so I had a lot of springs. However, I don't got that many springs left. So I like to think I burned off the first tranche, and then I burned off the second tranche. So that's how I think. So me and Hiroshi, we're like totally good. And I noticed that if you want to leave a legacy, you should live a long time. I learned this from Paul Rand when I visited his house. He was showing me all his fan letters. It was cute. He said, oh, look at this letter. I was like, whoa, wow, you're amazing, Paul Rand. I get it. Oh, look at this one. Oh, Paul Rand, you're amazing. I said, what's the pattern? And he said, look at this one. I said, oh, wait. He's noticed. It said, Dear Paul Rand, I love your design of the CBS logo. I said, you didn't design the CBS logo. He said, that's right. They think I did it all. See, there we go. Live long. Okay, back to Media Lab. When I joined the Media Lab, I knew I wasn't Muriel, so I couldn't continue the visible language workshop. It was such an amazing accomplishment. So I went on and created the aesthetics and computation group. Some of you may know processing and other things like that from that era. I later switched into the physical language workshop, went into commerce, things like NFTs, sort of crypto before that. We did commerce of art in the early days, and so I like to think that we had a lot of interesting times then, before it got big. You know, that's the nice thing about being ahead. You get to try and be ahead. Being ahead's pretty hard though, as you all know here, and not easy, much easier before. Okay, I used to make things out of old computers. When computers were like, we'd buy them every year. This is a series of pieces I showed in Japan in 2001. This is a typing machine. This is a self-drawing machine. And why did I build these things? People ask me. I don't know. I wanted to understand what could an old computer carcass do as a piece of art. This is my favorite one. It's the crash dummy tester, where the CD-ROM tray slams into the microphone and measures the impact. Because it's almost violent how fast it would come out. So anyways, these are things I used to create physically. I was also jealous of Damien Hirst and his formaldehyde shark thing. So I bought a bunch of iPods. I made iPod fish, things like this. I also was interested in humans. This was my piece on human relations. This is two iPods, one nestled against the other one. And this is the era of the iPod running the hard disk mechanism. They're spinning a hard disk, and I made two different versions of the same video. But over time, the hard disks are spinning, so there's like a nanosecond sort of shift. So they gradually get out of shift, and they might come back into phase like that. It's like a real marriage. You come in shift, you get it. No, we don't get each other. You get it. And then someone said, a collector said, what happens if one is broken? I said, that's very poetic, isn't it? Okay. And I was very fortunate. It was a time where a few people did it, so I got more accolades than I probably should have. And I think back to this era and feel how lucky I was, but also how I noticed at the same time things were changing in the world. In the 1990s, I think the Media Lab we used to brag that it had more computers per square meter than anywhere in the world. But by late 90s and early 2000s, we would notice, me and Hiroshi noticed, that students had better computers than we kept in the lab, and also industry had far better computing resources. So the kind of cost capability curve was crossed, and it made it hard to stay ahead of everybody else. And I had my own moment of reckoning. Do I really think I could be a professor? I was tenured, et cetera. It was all good. But this thing the young people say, the imposter syndrome, I love that phrase. I always had an imposter syndrome. And I felt it most when this is after I was senior, et cetera. You have to understand, in 1985, when I took artificial intelligence, there was this man, Patrick Henry Winston. Patrick Henry Winston was the guy who wrote all these books on Lisp. He was the AI guru. And I remember we were all wondering in class, to finally see Patrick Henry Winston. And some guy walks in with a sweater and a Coke and takes his sweater off. And, is that the graduate student? And then we thought, oh my gosh, that's Patrick Henry Winston. So many years later, when I was here and he was my colleague, I was walking the hallways somewhere, and there's one of these fancy buildings has these chalkboards that no one actually uses, but look cool. I was walking around 11 p.m., and I saw him like writing on the chalkboard by himself. And I said, Professor Winston, what are you doing? And he said, I'm practicing for a lecture tomorrow. And I thought, I'm not that committed. I knew I had to change. And I wrote a book called The Laws of Simplicity at the time to distill how I thought about design and technology and how they were coming together. And I had the chance to meet Bob Silby, and that's where I met Deva. We were on this curriculum committee together. And I had a turning point moment on that committee. I think I never told you about that. But this committee, we were in the curriculum committee together, which meets every few years to say, curriculum's okay. It's awesome. And there's some, oh, or not. And there's students on the committee too. So this is great, because they're like the customers. So we understand like, whoa, how close are we? And we were talking about freshman advising. And when we were at MIT, it was MIT from the era of the 80s, et cetera, we used to have faculty as freshman advisors. And I remember we were talking about, oh my gosh, MIT's changed its posture. We have professional career advisors. What's going on with this? And we know all the Jedi professors were saying like, that's terrible. When we were young, we had MIT professors as our advisors. And the students got up at that council. And they looked at all of us and said, what do you mean you're going to help us with our future careers? You all don't have real jobs. And I was like, whoa, what's that? I thought about that. I thought, oh, wait a second. Maybe what she's saying has truth. The world's changed. How far ahead are we? How do I follow her instead? I wanted to follow youth. I heard about this benefit from HR, Ramona, that MIT employees are eligible to get tuition assistance. I wanted to get an MBA part-time, so I went to the office to file that form. Thank you, Ramona. I remember someone saying, the person at the desk said, so what position are you trying to get? You're already a full professor, blah, blah, blah. And it was a 2-page form, so I was like, wow, if I fill this out, I'll either get a few $1,000s or not. Hard. So I wrote down president of MIT. Just in case he'll think, oh, if I don't give it to him, he'll remember. So thank you for the stamp. I got a few thousand from that, and I did my MBA. So I was interested. I was ready and curious. And there was a man named Whitman Richards who said to me this one thing as I was struggling with this. He told me to think beyond MIT and think about the world as a place to be and think. So it was a time in the world where there was an unknown senator, Barack Obama, had this weird book called Audacity of Hope. And I, as an American, got really excited about it. I was like, wow, this is really inspiring. And then an unusual thing came my way, the offer to be a president of a university. And I thought, I can't do that. I have no experience. But in the book, I kept reading these words, 3 words, yes, we can. So I thought, oh, yeah, I could. Yeah, I could do that. I think I could. And then it was actually Bill Mitchell who encouraged me, so I remember that at the time. Anyways, I was president there, and one of my dear mentors, Mitz Kataoka, called me up. And Mitz is an interesting person. He passed away a few years ago. He was a person who knew the Ray and Charles Eames, Namjoon Pak. He's from that generation of interesting people. But he told me that life is lived in 4 quarters. 0 to 25 years of age, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100, 4 quarters. And so I visualized this for myself to understand it. So there's 4 quarters to life. And he told me that most people don't make it to the 4th quarter. And he said, you lost your 1st quarter. Then he said, in your 3rd quarter, your body starts to fall apart. And I was like when I first met Mitz, I was like in the late 20s. And then he told me this when I was at the end of my 2nd quarter. So for those of you who are in your 2nd quarter, make the most of your 2nd quarter, Mitz told me. I think it's a really important quarter. Those of you who are in the 3rd quarter know this. 2nd quarter is awesome. Don't waste it. Okay, so anyways, I joined RISD as president. It was summer. People were really hopeful of me. I remembered I bought all these books called The First 90 Days, First 100 Days. And these books of leadership, I started getting into them. Like, wow, what is this? Wow, oh, it's so easy. Oh, great. And they all say unequivocally, as a new leader, people will ask you for your vision, and you should never tell them you have a vision. The vision comes from everyone. So do not have a vision. But what does everybody do? They come up to say, what's your vision? What's your vision? What's your vision? You're like, oh, I don't got a vision? Or what do you say? I was lucky because it was the summertime. And Brian K. Smith, who used to run the summer program and other things at RISD, knows this very well. Summer program, like, no one's there, so it's microphone off. I was just greeting the first batch of people of the summer. It was a hot, sweaty auditorium. I was still brand new. I thought, oh, I can focus group this. I got up, people like applauding for me like I'm dad. So, okay, I'm new here. I'm going to test out my vision. So I had 4 things written on a piece of paper. And I said, okay, this is the first one. It's like something like being the next generation of Damien Hirst, whatever kind of thing. It was like becoming a better artist, well-known. It got little tepid applause. The second one didn't land. I tried to use lifelong learning on that one, Mitch. But that didn't work. I was like, I know, because they're so young and they don't quite get it yet. And then I was giving up, and then I used this one here, which was building a justifiable case for creativity in our world. And wow, that one got, whoa, they got really excited about it. And I was like, huh, okay, that's a good indicator. An hour later, I was in the shop. We have a shop there, or the shop. And I got in the shop, I was shopping. I love shopping. Who loves shopping? It's good therapy. Shopping, and a young woman walked up to me. She said, oh, I just saw you speak there. I said, oh, well, thanks for coming from far away. She said, oh, I'm from Iowa. And I'm really glad what you said there. And I said, what did I say? And she said, you said you were going to help build a justifiable case for creativity. And I thought, why does that resonate with you? And she said, I'm like a sophomore in Iowa. People make fun of me all the time because I'm creative. And in that room, you said you would fight for me. So it was a powerful moment. And as I led an institution, I tried to find a way to do that at scale. And I was beta testing different slogans, and then I bumped into STEAM. By the way, again, I have to credit Brian Smith back there as one of the national advocates for adding art to STEM education. It was a big part of that movement, and it continues it forward even now. But I spent years lobbying in Congress, which many people didn't like that I did at the time. Why is John doing that? What's that? That's a waste of money. That's a waste of whatever. But it turned out okay. STEAM became something, and I'm really happy how it is something that really propels this idea that STEM alone is awesome, but STEAM is a little better. And some people may know that being a change agent comes at a price. You can look me up on the internet. There are things that have happened in the past that people cannot stop forgetting, which is I was the cyber president. I was the person who would use this thing called Twitter. I would do all kinds of things that today are quite common. But when you're trying to do something new, nobody likes it. And that's okay, is what I'm saying. A change agent is the price, and that's the thing you signed up for. And one of my favorite moments, I'll leave the RISD universe in a second, was I was at an event, and Jack Dorsey had just moved from Twitter and formed this company called Square. And I was at an event, and I was like, oh. I walked up to him and said, hey, can I get this Square thing? And can I give it away at commencement? And he said, sure. So he had a little team. They sent me all these 3D printed squares. And we were the first site at scale to give away squares at commencement, along with Kickstarter, along with Etsy. Junko, you remember this? So Junko led all this effort to give students a kind of graduation packet to enable them to survive and thrive in this new kind of mobile-first economy. And by the way, people hated this when they were like, oh, what is John doing? Second year, it was, oh, what is he doing? And so I got used to it. You know, I don't know, just trying to do stuff. Parents seemed to like it. And then year 5 came around, and the best thing ever happened. The best thing happened. There was a professor who came up to me on the street who was usually upset at me. And they came up to me and said, hey, John, we're having an exhibition at Woods Gary up the street. We're going to have a pop-up shop. I said, great. Hey, John, this year, we're taking credit cards. I said, yeah? How do you do that? I said, we use this thing called a square. I said, what's that? And then they went on and explained it to me in depth. And I said, that's awesome, we'll see you there. So that is awesome. And that's why I believe in this phrase, a leader, I re-ungendered this phrase, a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When their work is done, her aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. So those people who choose to lead change, this is the absolute best outcome. No fingerprints happened, and it's not about you, right? While I was there, I also joined the board of Sonos, and I was able to see a company go from Series D all the way to IPO, and I began wondering about this world that I'd heard about. And I wanted to learn more. And it was 2013, and mobile technology was changing the world. And this is a slide I created back then to understand why everything was changing. So if you see in the top graph is the way email used to work. We used to check email twice a day. Does anyone remember this? You would check email twice a day, and then it didn't feel good. It was an ouch in the morning, ouch in the evening. So if Eudora or whatever didn't feel awesome, Pine, you're like, it's okay, I'll come back to my life, I'll have my taco. It's okay, I'm away. But as now, people check their phone every second. This was like years ago, that's 5 minutes, now it's 5 seconds. So if the experience hurts, it's gonna ouch all day long. So user experience, because the mobile had to improve, that's why design rose during the late 2010s. Okay, and I was fortunate to have this alumnus of RISD, Joe Gebbia, who was the co-founder of Airbnb. And every time I came to campus, he would say 4 words, take the next step. So I was thinking like, he's telling everyone else, but I thought, maybe I should take the next step. I packed up my stuff at the RISD mansion, and I went to Silicon Valley to work in venture capital. And I got to work across startups across every category, and I relearned the world. It was so awesome. And for those of you, this is the most important thing I can tell you during this hybrid talk, the sidewalk is not flat. Do not forget this. Because when I was there in year 3, I was jogging at 4 a.m. and I discovered the sidewalk is not flat. And I broke my face, I broke my arm, it was bad. That's not flat. And then it's not flat, and your foot catches that, and it's not good. No. But I remember being carted into the ER and having this epiphany. And that was realizing that I looked Asian. I know, weird, huh? I realized I looked like this, and I was like, whoa, is that why? Oh, interesting. I realized I'm a type O minority. I can go everywhere and understand things. It's a real benefit. And I spent my time from that forward to look at inclusion and how in the technology world can we reshape that. Many things I had heard in the past that I couldn't truly hear, I began rehearing. I thought of the work that Mitchell Resnick did, bringing computers to different communities that could never access it, a community that was like my own as a child. And that work is so important. And so I've been asking since then, how do I get involved in more things? This is an effort led by Helena Price in Silicon Valley to point out this disparity. Again, this is from 2015, but these efforts have to continue. And I heard of this thing called remote work, and I thought it might take off. So, and this is when I was in venture capital, I heard of this remote work paradigm, so I joined the largest all-distributed tech company, Automatic, and I did that for 3 years, where I learned how remote works. I got slacked really quickly. And I was really impressed how it changed the economic inclusiveness of technology. And then because of that, I could work across any part of the world. I was in Detroit helping small businesses go online. And that was another way to see technology in different contexts. At the same time, Megan Smith took a group to Appalachia, and I was able to look at tech there. And it was 2017, so it was important for me to see a wider aperture of the country. And I've noticed that if I say things the wrong way, I get misquoted really easily. This is the year that Crazy Rich Asians came out, the movie. And people thought I come from some rich, privileged background. But I've noticed that if you say things, the media can misquote you, et cetera, whatever. The media is so powerful. And I'm not criticizing it. It's a physical property. And how to understand that best is to experience it. Okay. So I spent 6 years trying to say what I wanted to in a book, and that was How to Speak Machine. And I can't play the clip here, but you'll see the audio, actually, of David Bowie talking about the internet's impact. How many of you have seen this clip? If you haven't seen it, please watch it later, because it describes the BBC announcer is saying, this internet thing, it's going to go away. And Bowie's saying, no, it's something else. He was saying, it's almost as if an alien has landed on Earth, and it's going to change everything. And really what I tried to do is to depict the alien. It's an alien life form. In this book, I tried to explain that it is an alien life form. It has 3 properties that make it so alien. It never gets tired, it can span infinite space and in infinitesimal detail at the same time, and it can emulate humans. And it changes how we make products. They can now be incomplete. They can be instrumented. And lastly, they can create imbalance if we don't watch out. And then I moved into the marketing technology sector because I want to understand the general business. And this diagram to me is the best explanation of how business works for those of you who wonder about it. It's very simple. You have the buyer that isn't a customer yet. This is called the marketing loop. The buyer has a moment where the buyer becomes the customer. The buyer is, before they become a customer, the buyer is still buying. When they're a customer, it's a different experience. One is called marketing, one is called product, right? In the marketing experience, you have trigger, awareness, consideration, evaluation. At some point, money changes hands. When money happens, that's awesome, because now you're a buyer, you become a customer. When you're a customer, like I just paid extra for this webinar option here. Hello, everyone. Webinar option. I'm a buyer, I'm a customer now. And what happens, though, a customer gets unhappy, they leave. So this is an infinite loop of consumption. You're either stuck in the buyer loop, or you're retained in the customer loop, you leave the customer loop. Anyways, a simple way to understand everything in the business world. And especially with AI today, this left loop is very fast. It's catching your attention. It's getting you to convert. The right loop is much harder still. Product is much harder, which probably is a good question or opportunity. Okay, so as COVID happened, and this is from HBR in 2006. It warned of a pandemic. I find it funny how the cover was How to Be a Good Number 2. And this was predicted. And I was working in marketing technology and decided I want to work on the pandemic stuff. So I went to the security sector. So I was able to go deep on hurricanes, wildfires, shooters, all the terrible things on Earth. And by doing so, I was able to understand how dangerous the world recently became because of pandemics. This is a chart of all the bad things that happened in the last century. But as you can see it, people have died at the million scale multiple times in history. We just forget. And also, we have to note that this current climate we're in is filled with this as a backdrop. It's easy to forget that this happened just a few years ago. And good news, you're unlikely to die from anything like a shark attack. More likely a mosquito, unfortunately. This is the dark part of my presentation. And these are the top 5 causes of accidental death. Motor vehicles, look out. People ask about climate change, how it impacts hazards. Most of the hazards in the world are impacted by climate. When climate changes, all these types of hazards increase. Again, another example of the world we're in today. And this phrase is my favorite one from supply chain guru Yossi Shafii: be risk-averse, not risk-averse. So just be aware that it's okay to be afraid, it's okay to work through it, but if you're aware of the risks, it's actually extremely important. This is an ambigram I had created. It's where you flip it upside down, it reads differently. One way it reads resilience, the other way it reads adversity, because through adversity, we create resilience. You may be feeling not good right now. So there is a powerful thing from a psychologist, Seligman, called the ABCD method. First off, articulate the adversity you've encountered. And then believe how you're impacted, express that. And then consider the consequences of that belief. What does that mean? And my favorite is D, dispute your belief or distract yourself. I don't know about the latter one, but advice from a famous psychologist. Okay, anyways, I had to move back to Seattle for my parents. I had to find a job in Redmond. They're like a block away from Microsoft. And I got a job at Microsoft working in AI, and it was October 2022. My friends all said to me, wow, that's a really dumb idea, John. Working in AI in Microsoft. Bad idea. But then 1 month later, ChatGPT came out. Weird circumstance, and so I've been deep in the large language model revolution, and that's been exhilarating and interesting. And so by being close to AI, for those of you who said I was going to talk about AI, search for this. I have a lot of content online available, Design and Tech Report, South by Southwest. I give this every year, talking about design and tech. We're closing up. Here we go. Bill Mitchell, I just want to say, is someone that I hope, if you're looking for stuff to read, please buy one of his books. He wrote so many books, and the books span computation, society. They span so many themes. It's almost as if he was hanging out with Pliny the Elder. It's not a beer. It is a beer. And from one of my books, I wrote this thing that he said one time, blast away at it, get it done. So let's get it done, folks. Let's figure out what we have to do. Let's hit all 3 points of that triangle. It's an important time to do that. I want to thank Bill. I just joined the Miller-Knoll board. I think Bill would be happy because he likes those chairs too. Thank you, Bill. And this is a summary of this talk. This is from Royal East, used to be my favorite restaurant. This fortune changed my life. It says, the great pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do. So that's a summary for you, for people who are tracking with a large language model. And hybrids are always insecure because they're creative. And so I like this phrase, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. Creative doesn't want to become irrelevant. It's why they keep changing. So this is a summary slide. And the last one is something that Paul Rand said to me, which is really important. When I went to see Paul Rand at his studio, I was only supposed to be there for an hour. 8 o'clock I arrived. And he opened the door and said, you have to work all day with me for free, because my assistant is sick. So I said, whoa, weird. Okay, I'll do that. And it was 8 a.m. It was in Connecticut in the boonies. And I was sitting there working on his last book. It was weird, because I found him in a book. I'm working on his book. And then it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and I'm hungry. And back then, we didn't have snack bar technology. So I was like, whoa, awkward at someone's house who's really famous, and I'm hungry. And he came out with this sandwich. It was a bologna sandwich. And he put it in front of me. He said to me, I don't make sandwiches for anyone. And I said, oh, thank you, sir. So I was eating it, and it was so delicious. He's just sitting there looking at me while I'm eating, so it's very awkward. And he said, young man, I have something very important to tell you. I said, wow, what is that? He said, make lots of money. And he could see how disappointed I look. And he said, that isn't what you think. He said, everything he ever did that I loved, he made no money on it. He made money on things that didn't make as much money as he made money on things he didn't like to do to pay for what he loved to do. So that's his final note. Money is important as a hybrid. Earn a lot so you can have freedom. Okay, that's done. Thank you.